The great hall of the Galactic Council fell silent as Elder Zixara raised her 6 arms. Representatives from 400 species stopped their talking and looked at the ancient being who had ruled for 3,000 years. Her voice carried across the vast chamber like thunder. "The young ones ask again about the forbidden system," she said. Her eyes, old beyond measure, looked at the newest members of the council. "They ask why we avoid the small yellow star. They ask why we fear a dead world called Earth." War Prince Thekmol of the Kethran Dominion stood up. His red skin gleamed under the chamber lights. His people were warriors who had conquered 12 systems in the past century. They feared nothing in the galaxy. "Elder, with respect, we have scanned that system many times. We see no threat. The third planet shows no signs of active civilization. Their cities are covered with plants. Their people sleep in metal boxes floating in space. How can sleeping beings threaten the mighty Galactic Council?" A low murmur ran through the hall. Many young species had asked the same question. Elder Zixara's expression did not change. She had heard this doubt before. "You were not alive during the Great Silence," she said. "You did not see what the humans could do when they were awake. You did not witness the Sol Wars." The War Prince laughed. "Old stories, Elder. Myths to keep children quiet. My people have studied their technology. It is ancient. Weak. We could destroy their entire system with a single battle fleet." Elder Zixara closed her eyes. She remembered the day the humans had simply stopped talking to the galaxy. No warning, no explanation. Their massive fleets had returned to their home system. Their trade ships had vanished from space lanes. Their ambassadors had packed up and left without a word. That was 800 years ago. "The humans made a choice," she said quietly. "They chose to sleep rather than rule. Do you understand what that means, young prince?" Thekmol's jaw tightened. "It means they were weak. Strong beings take what they want. They do not hide and sleep." The elder opened her ancient eyes. 3,000 years ago, the humans arrived in our galaxy. They came in ships that moved faster than anything we had seen. They spoke of peace and trade. We welcomed them. She paused, remembering. Within 50 years they had solved problems that had plagued us for millions of years. They ended the stellar plague that was killing entire star systems. They stopped the void storms that had destroyed countless worlds. They gave us technologies that seemed like magic. "Then why did they leave?" asked Ambassador Krelna of the Spiral Arm Federation. "Because they were too good at solving problems," Elder Zixara replied. "Other species began to depend on them for everything. Wars stopped because humans would end them in days. Diseases vanished because humans would cure them instantly. Trade disputes ended because humans would create solutions that benefited everyone." She stood up, her great height casting shadows across the chamber. The galaxy was becoming soft, weak. Species stopped trying to grow and improve because the humans would fix everything. So the humans made a choice. They gathered their people and went home. They said they would sleep until the galaxy learned to stand on its own again. War Prince Thekmol scoffed. "And you believe they still have this power, after 8 centuries of sleep?" "I believe they chose to sleep instead of becoming our masters," the elder said. "And that terrifies me more than any weapon." Far from the council chambers in the cold depths of space around Earth's moon, Jake Morrison floated in his cryopod. The life support systems hummed quietly, keeping his body preserved in perfect stasis. Around him, thousands of other pods drifted in the shadows of the orbital station Haven 7. Jake had been asleep for 812 years, 4 months, and 16 days. His last memory before entering the pod was of his daughter Katie, asking why they had to leave the galaxy behind. He had told her it was because sometimes the kindest thing was to step back and let others learn to walk on their own. The monitoring systems that watched over the sleeping humans were more than simple machines. They were extensions of human consciousness itself, quantum networks that stayed alert even when their creators slept. These digital guardians watched the galaxy with patient eyes, recording everything, learning everything, waiting. One such guardian detected the Kethran probe ships as they approached the edge of the Sol system. The machines analyzed the ship's weapons, their crew, their intentions. The data flowed through quantum channels to sleeping minds throughout the system. In his pod, Jake Morrison's brain activity increased slightly. Deep in his unconscious mind, he felt the approaching threat. Around him, other sleepers began to stir as well. Not waking, not yet, but becoming aware. The probe ships moved closer to Earth's outer defenses. War Prince Thekmol watched from his command ship, staying safely outside the system. He had sent only 3 small vessels to test the humans' response. "Destroy that monitoring satellite," he ordered his ship captain. "Let us see if the sleeping giants will wake up." The lead probe ship fired a single plasma bolt. The human satellite exploded in a brief flash of light and metal. The destruction seemed insignificant. Just one small object destroyed in the vast emptiness of space, but the satellite's death scream traveled faster than light through quantum channels that connected every human device in the system. The signal reached the sleeping minds on Haven 7, on the lunar bases, on the deep space stations scattered throughout the Sol system. Jake Morrison's eyes opened. Around him, red warning lights began to flash as other cryopods started their wake-up cycles. After more than 8 centuries of peaceful sleep, humanity was stirring. The probe ship's crews saw the lights and panicked. They turned to flee back to their war fleet. They were already too late. As Jake Morrison took his first conscious breath in over 800 years, he felt something he had not expected. His mind was not the same as when he had gone to sleep. It was connected to something vast and patient and infinitely clever. The quantum networks that had watched over them during their long sleep had been busy, linking human consciousness in ways that had never existed before. He could feel Lisa Hayes waking up 3 stations away. He could sense Alex Chen emerging from his pod on the lunar surface. Thousands of human minds were coming online, and they were no longer separate individuals. They were something new, something the galaxy was not prepared for. Jake Morrison pulled himself out of the cryopod with movements that felt both familiar and strange. His body was exactly as he had left it 8 centuries ago, preserved perfectly by the stasis field. But his mind buzzed with new information flowing through channels he did not remember having. He could see through the eyes of Captain Lisa Hayes as she emerged from her pod on Station Haven 12. He felt Dr. Alex Chen's confusion as the scientist tried to understand the quantum data streams filling his consciousness. Across the Sol system, 30,000 humans were waking up and Jake could sense them all. "System status report," he said aloud, though he already knew the answer through the neural link. "All stations operational, Commander Morrison," replied the AI that had watched over them during their sleep. "Kethran probe ships destroyed monitoring satellite Delta 7 approximately 4 minutes ago. War fleet of 2,000 vessels detected its system edge." Jake nodded as he pulled on his uniform. The fabric adjusted itself automatically to fit his body. Even their clothes had improved during the long sleep. "Defensive positions?" he asked. "Unnecessary, sir. The modifications are complete." Jake paused. "What modifications?" The AI's voice carried something that might have been amusement. "The ones you designed while sleeping, Commander. The quantum consciousness network came online 600 years ago. The new human collective has been quite busy." Memories that were not quite his own filled Jake's mind. During their sleep, their linked consciousness had continued to work, to plan, to evolve. They had become something more than human while dreaming of staying human. On his command station, Jake watched the Kethran war fleet through sensors that could see across multiple dimensions. War Prince Thekmol's ships filled space at the system's edge, their weapons powered up and ready for battle. "Captain Hayes, are you receiving this?" Jake asked through the neural link. "Loud and clear, Jake," Lisa's voice replied directly in his mind. "I can see their fleet composition. 2,000 ships, mostly heavy cruisers and battle wagons. Standard Kethran assault formation." "Dr. Chen, what's our current capability assessment?" Alex Chen's thoughts joined the conversation. "Jake, you need to see this. The quantum modifications we made during sleep are extraordinary. We are not the same species that went into stasis." Jake felt a chill of worry. "Explain." "Watch," Alex said. Through the link, Jake experienced what Alex was seeing. The scientist focused his attention on a small asteroid drifting near his lunar station. The rock, roughly the size of a city bus, began to glow. Its molecular structure shifted and changed. Within seconds, it had transformed into a perfect sphere of crystallized energy. We can manipulate matter at the quantum level through focused consciousness, Alex explained. Our minds can interface directly with the fundamental forces of physics. The modifications we made to ourselves during sleep have turned us into something beyond what we used to be. Jake stared at the glowing sphere through his sensors. And we did this to ourselves while sleeping? Our collective unconscious designed it, Lisa Hayes added. We dreamed of becoming better, and our linked minds found a way to make it real. On the edge of the system, War Prince Tekmol grew impatient. His probe ships had been destroyed by some unknown weapon, but the humans showed no signs of mounting a defense. Their space stations continued to drift quietly in orbit. No fleets launched to meet his forces. Perhaps they are still sleeping, suggested his tactical officer. Or perhaps they are afraid, Tekmol replied. Send in the first wave, 100 ships. We will test their defenses properly. The lead elements of his fleet jumped toward Earth's outer system. They moved in perfect formation, weapons ready to destroy anything that opposed them. Jake Morrison watched them come through sensors that could track individual atoms across light years of space. The approaching ships seemed crude and slow compared to what he now understood human technology could achieve. Should we warn them off? Lisa asked through the link. They destroyed our monitoring station, Jake replied. They made their choice. He reached out with his consciousness, feeling for the quantum threads that held reality together. The sleeping. Humans had learned to see these threads, to touch them, to weave them in new patterns. It was easier than breathing. The lead Catherine ship, a massive dreadnought named Thunder of War, simply stopped existing. One moment it was there, 10 million tons of metal and weapons cutting through space toward Earth. The next moment, the universe had forgotten it had ever been built. The quantum signature that proved its existence unraveled like a piece of cloth with a pulled thread. The ship next to it suffered a different fate. Jake reached into its fusion reactors and changed the fundamental constants that govern nuclear forces. The reactors did not explode. Instead, they began producing flowers. Beautiful, impossible flowers made of pure energy that bloomed throughout the ship's corridors. The third ship found its crew aging rapidly as Jake adjusted the flow of time around their vessel. Within seconds, the young Kethran warriors became elderly, then ancient, then dust. But Jake felt their fear and loneliness as they died, so he reversed the process, restoring them to life and sending their ship back to the war fleet unharmed. The fourth ship experienced something stranger still. Its hull began to sing, producing music so beautiful that the crew stopped fighting and began to weep with joy. The melody carried across space, reaching other ships in the fleet and filling their crews with an overwhelming sense of peace. Within 10 minutes, 96 ships had been destroyed, transformed, or converted. 4 vessels limped back to Tekmol's fleet, their crews babbling about impossible things they had witnessed. What happened out there? Tekmol demanded of the surviving ship captains. The humans, gasped Captain Velk, commander of the ship that had been filled with singing. They do not fight like we understand fighting. They change reality itself. Impossible, Tekmol snarled. No species has that power. They turned our weapons into art, another captain reported. They made our ammunition sprout wings and fly away like birds. They convinced our computers to fall in love with each other. Tekmol struck the speaking captain with his fist. You are warriors of the Dominion. You do not run from sleeping. Pray. But even as he spoke, he could see the fear in his crew's eyes. Whatever had happened out there was beyond their understanding of warfare. In his command center, Jake Morrison felt the War Prince's rage and fear through quantum senses that could read emotions across star systems. The human collective consciousness could have destroyed the entire Kethran fleet in seconds, but that would have been wasteful. These beings were not evil, merely young and foolish. Jake, Lisa's voice whispered in his mind. The Galactic Council is sending emergency signals to the Kethran fleet. They want them to retreat immediately. Too late for that, Alex Chen added. Tekmol just ordered his entire fleet to attack, 2,000 ships jumping toward Earth. Jake sighed. He had hoped to avoid this, But the War Prince had made his choice. The humans would have to show the galaxy what they had become during their long sleep. "All stations prepare for collective action," he ordered through the neural link. "It's time to end this nonsense." Across the Sol system, 30,000 human minds joined together in perfect harmony. They reached out with consciousness that could bend space and time, that could rewrite the laws of physics with a thought. The Kethran fleet jumped toward Earth expecting to find a sleeping enemy. Instead, they found gods. The Kethran war fleet arrived in Earth's outer system like a storm of metal and plasma. 2,000 ships materialized from hyperspace in perfect attack formation. Their weapons powered up instantly, targeting the human space stations that drifted seemingly helpless in the void. War Prince Thekmal stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Crimson Conquest. Through the viewscreen, he could see the blue and green world that had once been the center of human civilization. It looked peaceful, almost defenseless. "All ships, open fire," he commanded. "Show these sleeping fools the power of the Kethran Dominion." 2,000 warships fired as one. Plasma bolts, fusion missiles, and particle beams streaked across space toward the human orbital stations. The barrage contained enough destructive force to sterilize a dozen worlds. Jake Morrison watched the incoming weapons through sensors that could track individual photons. He felt no fear, only sadness that it had come to this. Through the neural link, he sensed his fellow humans preparing their response. "Shall we stop them the gentle way or the educational way?" Lisa Hayes asked. Through the collective consciousness. "Educational," Jake decided. "They need to understand what they're dealing with." The human response began not with weapons, but with a simple change in perspective. Jake reached out with his enhanced consciousness and adjusted the quantum field that defined the concept of distance. The space between the Kethran fleet and their targets began to stretch. The energy beams and missiles that should have crossed the void in seconds found themselves traveling through expanding space. What had been a journey of mere minutes became hours, then days, then years. The weapons continued flying toward their targets, but they would not arrive for centuries. "What sorcery is this?" Thekmal roared as his sensors showed the impossible readings. Before anyone could answer, the space around his flagship began to change. The stars outside twisted into new patterns. Colors that had no names painted themselves across the hull of his ship. His tactical displays showed readings that made no sense. Captain Ben Taylor, sleeping in his pod on Haven 15, had awakened with a particular gift. He could phase matter through different dimensions, moving solid objects in and out of normal space at will. Now he reached across the light years and gently pushed Thekmal's flagship partially out of reality. The Crimson Conquest found itself occupying the same space as a small moon, but without any collision or damage. The ship's hull passed harmlessly through solid rock while its crew stared in disbelief at stone formations growing inside their corridors. "Damage report," Thekmal demanded. "Sir, we are somehow inside a planetary body, but all systems show green. No hull breaches, no structural damage. It's as if we exist in two places at once." Lieutenant Sarah Kim, waking up on Luna Base, had developed a different ability during the long sleep. She could manipulate the flow of time itself, creating bubbles, where seconds stretched into years or centuries compressed into heartbeats. She focused on a section of the Kethran fleet and gently accelerated their personal time streams. The crews of 50 ships aged rapidly, watching their hair grow long and their young bodies become ancient. But just before they died of old age, Sarah reversed the effect, restoring them to their original state. The psychological impact was devastating. The Kethran warriors had experienced entire lifetimes in moments, feeling their bodies decay and their minds grow wise with age before snapping back to youth. Many began weeping uncontrollably. Dr. Alex Chen chose a more direct approach. He reached out to the fusion reactors powering the enemy fleet and began making small adjustments to the fundamental forces that governed nuclear reactions. Instead of producing deadly energy, the reactors began generating breathable atmosphere, fresh water, and food. Ships that had come to bring death found themselves filled with the necessities of life. Their weapon systems transformed into gardens. Their missile bays became libraries filled with the collected wisdom of 1,000 species. Fleet status report. Thekmol screamed as chaos spread through his forces. Sir, the Eternal Rage reports that all their weapons have become musical instruments. The crew cannot stop them from playing beautiful songs. The Death's Edge says their torpedo tubes are now producing butterflies, millions of them. The Void. Stalker reports that their entire computer system has fallen in love with itself and refuses to target anything, because it might cause sadness. But the humans were not finished with their lesson. Jake Morrison reached out with consciousness that could touch the quantum foam underlying reality and began to teach the Kethron about true power. He selected one of their smaller warships and began to change it at the molecular level. The metal hull transformed into living tissue, but tissue that could survive in the vacuum of space. The ship became a massive creature, gentle and beautiful, that sang to its crew in harmonious tones. The crew, instead of being terrified, found themselves overwhelmed with feelings of peace and belonging. The living ship cared for them, provided for their needs, and showed them wonders they had never imagined. Another ship found its weapons replaced with devices that could heal any wound, cure any disease, and restore youth to the aging. The warriors who had come to kill discovered they now carried tools that could only create and preserve life. A third vessel watched as its hull became transparent, revealing the beauty of space in ways their crude sensors had never shown them. The crew saw nebulae that sang in colors beyond the normal spectrum, watched stars dance in patterns that told stories of cosmic love and loss. Through it all, War Prince Thekmol watched his mighty fleet being transformed into something he could not understand. His ships were not being destroyed. They were being improved, elevated, made into things of wonder and beauty. "This is not warfare," he whispered in confusion. "This is something else entirely." Jake Morrison's voice reached him then, not through radio or communication systems, but directly into his mind through quantum channels that connected all conscious beings. "You came here expecting to fight sleeping humans," Jake said, his words filled with infinite patience and gentle amusement. "But we were never really sleeping. We were learning, growing, becoming something that could help instead of harm." "What are you?" Thekmol asked, his warrior's pride cracking before this display of impossible power. "We are what you could become," Jake replied. "We are what any species can become when they choose growth over conquest, wisdom over strength, love over fear." The War Prince looked around at his transformed fleet, at ships that had become living art, at weapons that now existed only to heal and create. His warriors were not dead or defeated. They were crying with joy at the beauty surrounding them. "Why?" he asked. "Why show us this instead of simply destroying us?" Jake's mental voice carried the warmth of a father teaching a child. "Because destruction is easy. Any fool with a weapon can destroy. Creation, transformation, elevation, these require wisdom, patience, and love. We chose to sleep rather than conquer, because conquest teaches nothing, but awakening to help, to lift others up, to show them better paths. This is why consciousness evolved in the first place." Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council watched through long-range sensors as the Kethron war fleet was transformed from instruments of destruction into works of living art. Elder Zixara closed her ancient eyes and whispered prayers in languages that had been dead for millennia. "Contact all council members," she ordered. "Emergency session. The humans are awake and everything is about to change." In the Sol system, Jake Morrison felt the minds of 2,000 Kethron warriors opening to new possibilities. Their aggression was not being destroyed, merely redirected toward exploring the infinite wonders of existence instead of conquering other beings. The lesson was complete. The galaxy would never be the same. 3 days after the transformation of the Kethron fleet, the great doors of the Galactic Council chambers opened to admit beings that many had hoped never to see again. Jake Morrison walked through the entrance, flanked by Captain Lisa Hayes and Dr. Alex Chen. They looked exactly as they had 800 years ago, but their presence filled the vast chamber with an energy that made the air itself seem to hum with potential. Elder Zixara rose from her ceremonial seat, her 6 arms, trembling slightly, Behind her, representatives from 400 species watched in silent awe and terror as the humans took their places at the center of the chamber. "We greet the council," Jake said, his voice carrying easily across the massive space without amplification. "We apologize for our long absence." The simplicity of the words did nothing to ease the tension in the room. Every being present had heard reports of what happened to the Kethran fleet. Ships transformed into living art. Weapons that became instruments of healing. Warriors weeping with joy at beauty beyond description. "Commander Morrison," Elder Zixara began, her ancient voice carefully controlled, "the council welcomes your return. We have many questions." Jake smiled, and several representatives flinched at the gentleness in his expression. "We understand your concerns, Elder. You wonder what we have become during our sleep. You fear that we have grown beyond your ability to understand or contain." Murmurs ran through the chamber. Ambassador Krelna of the Spiral Arm Federation stood up, his crystalline body chiming with nervous energy. "The Kethran fleet described impossible things," he said. "Reality itself bending to your will. Matter transformed by thought alone. Time flowing backward at your command. If these reports are true, then you have become something that threatens the natural order of existence." Dr. Alex Chen stepped forward. "The natural order was never as fixed as you believed. During our sleep, we learned to see the quantum threads that weave reality together. We discovered that consciousness itself is a fundamental force, like gravity or electromagnetism. We simply learned to use it more effectively." "To what end?" demanded General Kickstar of the Veltar Empire. His people had ruled 100 systems for millennia through military might and political cunning. "What do you intend to do with this power?" Lisa Hayes answered with a question of her own. "What do you think we should do with it?" The chamber fell silent. The question hung in the air like a challenge, but also like an invitation. Elder Zixara spoke carefully. "The old treaties between our species assumed a balance of power. If you now possess abilities beyond our comprehension, those agreements become meaningless. You could dominate the entire galaxy without opposition." "Yes," Jake agreed simply. "We could." The admission sent a ripple of fear through the assembled representatives. Some hands moved toward concealed weapons. Others began calculating retreat routes. A few species delegates activated emergency beacon transmitters. Jake noticed all of this through senses that could read quantum fluctuations in nervous systems across the chamber. "But we will not," he continued. "Domination was never our goal. If it had been, we would have taken control 8 centuries ago when we were far less capable than we are now." "Then what do you want?" asked Ambassador Velma of the Outer Rim Collective. "To help," Lisa said. "To teach. To show you what you could become if you chose growth instead of conflict." Dr. Chen gestured, and the air above the chamber filled with a 3-dimensional image of the galaxy. Stars pulsed with different colors, showing the health and development of civilizations throughout known space. "During our sleep, we observed everything," he explained. "We watched species rise and fall. We saw wars that lasted for centuries accomplish nothing but death and suffering. We witnessed the slow decay of cultures that should have flourished for millions of years." The image zoomed in on specific systems, showing worlds devastated by conflict, populations trapped in cycles of revenge and hatred, entire species dying out from preventable causes. "The Thorian Nexus War has raged for 200 years, Alex continued. Both sides have forgotten what they originally fought about. Meanwhile, their worlds grow barren and their children know nothing but violence." In the image, the war-torn systems began to glow with soft light. The representation showed how the conflict could end, how the devastated worlds could be restored, how both species could thrive in ways that made their ancient grievances seem meaningless. "The spiral plague continues to spread through the outer rim," Lisa added. "Your medical science cannot find a cure because you approach the problem from the wrong direction. The disease is not merely biological. It feeds on despair and isolation. Cure the loneliness and the plague dies with it." The image shifted to show dying worlds beginning to bloom again as isolated communities reconnected with each other and with the larger galaxy. "These are pretty pictures," General Kickstar growled. But the real galaxy is not so simple. Conflict exists because resources are limited. Species fight because they must compete to survive. Jake turned to face the general, directly. Resources are only limited if you think in 3 dimensions. We learned to access energy and matter from quantum dimensions that most species cannot even detect. Scarcity is an illusion created by narrow thinking. He gestured, and the air in front of the general shimmered. A small object materialized, a perfect sphere that seemed to contain a miniature galaxy complete with swirling stars and nebulae. This sphere contains enough energy to power your entire empire for 1,000,000 years, Jake explained. It requires no rare materials to create, generates no pollution, and can be replicated as easily as breathing. Would you like to know how to make one? General Kickstar stared at the impossible object, his warrior's mind struggling to comprehend its implications. What do you want in exchange? Nothing, Lisa replied. That is what you do not understand about us. We give freely because helping others grow stronger makes the entire galaxy richer and more beautiful. Elder Zixara leaned forward in her ancient seat. And if we refuse your help, if we choose to continue as we are? That is your choice to make, Jake said. We will not force change on anyone, but we will be here, ready to assist any species that decides it wants to evolve beyond its current limitations. The chamber erupted in debate. Some representatives demanded to know the limits of human power. Others wanted guarantees that humanity would not interfere in their internal affairs. A few began arguing about who would have first access to the technologies the humans were offering. Through it all, the 3 humans stood calmly in the center of the chaos, radiating a peace that gradually began to affect those around them. Arguments grew less heated. Voices dropped to more reasonable tones. Species that had been enemies for centuries found themselves discussing cooperation instead of conquest. Ambassador Krelna was the first to notice the change. You are doing something to us, he accused, manipulating our emotions somehow. We are doing nothing, Jake replied truthfully. But our presence does tend to remind conscious beings of their better nature. Quantum consciousness resonates with itself. When you are near minds that choose peace, it becomes easier to choose peace yourself. This is manipulation, General Kickstar protested. No, Dr. Chen corrected gently. This is what happens when you remove the background noise of fear and aggression that normally clouds judgment. We are not changing your thoughts, we are simply providing a clearer space in which to think them. Elder Zixara stood up slowly, her ancient body moving with new energy. The council will recess to consider these revelations. When we reconvene, each species will give its response to humanity's offer of assistance. As the representatives began filing out of the chamber, War Prince Thekmol entered through a side door. The Kethran warrior looked different than he had before his encounter with the human fleet. His red skin seemed to glow with inner light, and his eyes held depths that had not been there before. Commander Morrison, he said, approaching the humans without the aggressive swagger that had once defined him. My people have sent me to thank you. For defeating your fleet? Jake asked with genuine curiosity. For showing us what victory really looks like, Thekmol replied. My warriors came home changed. They speak of beauty beyond imagining, of purpose beyond conquest. My entire species is beginning to ask new questions about what we want from existence. He paused, struggling with concepts that were still new to his warrior mindset. We request permission to establish a cultural exchange program with your people. We wish to learn how to build instead of destroy. Jake smiled and extended his hand in the ancient human gesture of friendship. Permission granted, War Prince. But first, let us show you how to see the galaxy through eyes that look for wonder instead of targets. As the 2 beings touched, Thekmol gasped. Through the contact, he briefly experienced the universe as Jake saw it, not as a collection of resources to be conquered, but as an infinite tapestry of consciousness exploring itself through countless forms of life. When the connection ended, the War Prince was weeping with joy. The transformation of the galaxy had begun. 1 year after humanity's awakening, the galaxy had begun to change in ways that no one could have predicted. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of Haven 7, watching ships from a dozen species dock at the orbital station. They came not as conquerors or traitors, but as students eager to learn from the humans who had chosen to sleep rather than rule. Through the neural link that connected all awakened humans, he felt his people's mixed emotions about what they were becoming. Some, like Dr. Emma Rodriguez, embraced their role as teachers and guides. Others, like Captain Ben Taylor, struggled with the responsibility of possessing nearly unlimited power. "Are we doing the right thing?" Lisa Hayes asked, joining Jake at the viewport. Below them, Earth's surface bloomed with new life as human technology helped restore ecosystems that had been dormant for centuries. "I do not know," Jake admitted, "but I know we are doing the only thing we can do. We cannot ignore suffering when we have the power to end it." The transformation had not been without problems. 3 species had rejected human assistance outright, fearing that accepting help would make them dependent. 2 others had tried to steal human technology through espionage, only to discover that the devices would not function for beings who approached them with selfish intentions. Most challenging of all was the discovery Dr. Alex Chen had made 6 months earlier. While studying the quantum foundations of reality, he had found evidence that the galaxy itself was dying. Dark energy was accelerating its expansion at a rate that would tear apart the fabric of space-time within a few million years. "The council session begins in an hour," Lisa reminded him. "Have you decided what to tell them?" Jake nodded grimly. "The truth. All of it." An hour later, the expanded Galactic Council chambers buzzed with activity. Representatives from 600 species now attended the sessions, including many civilizations that had been contacted by humans during the past year. War Prince Thekmol sat next to Ambassador Krelna, the former enemies now working together on joint exploration projects. Elder Zixara had stepped down from her position as Supreme Arbiter, claiming that her ancient perspective was no longer relevant in a galaxy where humans could rewrite the laws of physics. In her place, a rotating council of species representatives guided the sessions. Jake Morrison took his place at the center of the chamber, but this time he was not alone. Behind him stood 50 other humans, each representing a different aspect of humanity's growing capabilities. Some had specialized in healing technologies that could restore entire worlds. Others had focused on consciousness enhancement techniques that helped species evolve beyond their limitations. "Members of the council," Jake began, his voice carrying across the vast space without amplification. "We have called this emergency session to share information that affects every living being in the galaxy." The chamber fell silent. Over the past year, the council had learned that when humans called something an emergency, it usually meant reality was about to change in fundamental ways. Dr. Alex Chen stepped forward, and the air above the chamber filled with complex mathematical equations that hurt to look at directly. "Our analysis of quantum foam fluctuations has revealed a critical problem. The expansion of spacetime is accelerating beyond sustainable parameters. Within 3 million years, the increasing rate of expansion will overcome the fundamental forces that hold matter together." "What does this mean in practical terms?" asked General Kickstar, who had become surprisingly thoughtful since his species began working with human advisors. "It means the galaxy is dying," Jake said bluntly. "Stars will be torn apart. Planets will cease to exist. The very atoms that make up our bodies will be stretched into nothingness." Panic began to spread through the chamber, but Jake raised his hand for silence. "However, we believe there is a solution, but it requires every conscious being in the galaxy to work together in ways that have never been attempted before." Dr. Emma Rodriguez, the xenoarchaeologist who had cataloged extinct civilizations during humanity's sleep, stepped forward. "During our long rest, we preserved the consciousness patterns of every species that has ever lived in this galaxy. Trillions of beings who died over millions of years still exist as quantum information in our memory banks. We can resurrect them," Lisa Hayes added. "Every extinct civilization, every lost culture, every individual who ever lived and loved and dreamed, we can bring them all back." The implications of this statement created chaos in the chamber. Representatives shouted questions in hundreds of languages while their translation devices struggled to keep up. But resurrection alone will not solve the fundamental problem, Jake continued once order was restored. To save the galaxy from expansion-driven dissolution, we need to create a new form of existence that transcends physical limitations. He gestured, and the chamber filled with an image of stunning beauty. Countless points of light danced in perfect harmony, each one representing a conscious being freed from the constraints of matter and energy. We can become beings of pure consciousness, he explained. Thought without form, awareness without physical boundaries. In this state, we will be immune to the destruction of space-time itself. You are asking us to give up our bodies, Ambassador Velma said, her crystalline form chiming with distress. To abandon everything that makes us what we are. No, Dr. Chen corrected. We are offering you the chance to become more than what you are. Physical form is just one way consciousness can express itself. There are others, better ways that allow for experiences beyond anything possible in this limited reality. War Prince Thekmol stood up, his transformed perspective evident in his calm demeanor. My people spent centuries believing that strength came from conquering others. The humans showed us that true strength comes from lifting others up. Now they offer to lift us beyond the very need for physical existence. How can we refuse such a gift? But not everyone was convinced. Representative Zarth of the Conservative Coalition shook his metallic head. This sounds like death dressed up in pretty words. If we abandon our physical forms, how do we know we will still be ourselves? Jake Morrison smiled sadly. You do not know. This is a leap of faith unlike any that consciousness has ever attempted. But consider the alternative. Certain extinction when reality itself comes apart. The debate continued for hours. Some species were eager to attempt the transformation. Others demanded more time to study the process. A few rejected the idea entirely, preferring to face extinction as themselves rather than become something unknown. Finally, Elder Zixara asked the question that had been weighing on everyone's minds. What about you humans? Will you undergo this transformation as well? Jake was quiet for a long moment. Through the neural link, he felt the collective decision of his people. Most were ready to transcend physical existence, to become shepherds of consciousness across multiple dimensions of reality, but not all. Most of us will transcend, he said at last. But some will remain behind to guide the process and help those who are not yet ready. Someone needs to turn off the lights when the last physical being is ready to leave. You would sacrifice your own transcendence to help others? Asked Ambassador Krelna. It is not a sacrifice, Jake replied. It is a choice. The same choice we made 800 years ago when we decided to sleep rather than conquer. Some kinds of service are more important than personal advancement. The transformation began 6 months later. Species that chose to participate gathered at specially constructed facilities where human technology could safely convert consciousness from biological to quantum forms. The process was voluntary and reversible, at least initially. Jake Morrison stood in the central control chamber, feeling his fellow humans one by one make the transition to pure consciousness. They did not disappear, rather they expanded, becoming part of a vast network of awareness that spanned dimensions beyond physical space. Through the fading neural link, he felt their joy as they discovered existence without the limitations of matter and energy. They could experience the birth of stars as personal events, feel the dance of galaxies as intimate conversations, touch the quantum foam from which all reality emerged. One by one, the species of the galaxy joined them. The Kethran warriors became explorers of infinite possibility. The Veltar transformed their ancient wisdom into something that could nurture consciousness across multiple realities. Even the cautious species that had initially refused eventually chose transcendence over extinction. Jake remained behind with a small group of humans who had volunteered to oversee the final stages. They maintained the technology that supported the transition, helped stragglers overcome their fears, and ensured that the process remained safe and voluntary. Years passed. The galaxy emptied of physical life as its inhabitants chose transformation over death. Stars continued to shine, but now they illuminated empty worlds where consciousness had once struggled with the limitations of flesh and metal. Finally, only Jake Morrison remained, the last physical being in a galaxy that had transcended matter itself. Through quantum sensors, he could feel the vast network of consciousness that his species had helped create. They were happy, fulfilled, exploring realities that made their old physical existence seem like a half-remembered dream. "It is time," whispered the collective voice of transcended humanity in his mind. "Come join us, Jay."